Aloha and welcome to this screencast where I'm going to take a walkthrough of the Meteor default application. That's the one that Meteor gives you when you say Meteor create foo. Okay, and when you do that and you run it, what you end up with on localhost 3000 is something that looks like this, where it says welcome to Meteor, and then you click me, and you get this message that says how many times you clicked the button, and then you've got some links down here. If you look at the code, it looks like this. We've got this main with a body. The body refers to two templates, a hello template and a info template, which are kind of inserted into the body there, and then you've got this little statement. You press the button, and then there's this reference to counter. So that's kind of what the code looks like, and it's very simple, but there's still some fairly unintuitive things going on here. The first thing I want to point out that trips up some newbies is that we've got both a field in the template called counter, and we've got a helper function called counter. And so when you refer to counter here, what the heck are you actually referring to? And what you're referring to is the what you're referring to is the helper function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this helper function here to counter value, and then I'm going to go to here and notice that it still works. Okay, so so that just kind of helps you understand that this is actually a reference to the helper function. Okay, counter value. So I just want to disambiguate that for you. The next thing to notice is that we are always, in all three of these places, we have these callback functions, you can think of them, or just functions that are passed in. We pass in a function in the onCreated, the onCreated API of this hello template, and in the helpers API and the events API. I don't know the best way to describe that to you right now, but what I want you to notice is that we create a field on the template instance in the onCreated function using this.counter. And then we access that same field counter inside this helpers structure using template.instance. And then inside events, we reference that same counter field by referencing a parameter that's passed in that happens to be called instance in this case. So that's a little unintuitive that there are three different ways in each of these three different structures to access the same darn field, okay, in each place. All right, and that's that's just Meteor for you. Okay, Meteor wants you to use this when you're in the onCreated callback to refer to the instance that's being created. And then inside helper functions, it wants you to invoke template.instance to get that instance object that you can now access the counter field for. And then inside events, you should provide this second parameter, which will be bound to template.instance, or if you prefer this, the same darn thing, and then you can access the field counter there. Okay, so that's the first thing that might trip you up if you're just reading this and trying to understand what's going on. The second thing to note is there's this use of a reactive VAR. Reactive VARs are the way that Meteor does its magic, okay? Because you notice when we actually run this thing, in some way we click a button, and then somehow magically the number of times we've clicked the button is just the page is being updated with that state without us hitting refresh or without us doing seemingly anything. It just magically happens. So the reason that these things can magically happen in Meteor is due to a feature called reactivity, which is the notion that in Meteor it's going to monitor the state of objects and then figure out if it needs to update a piece of the page when the state of an object changes, and then just go do that for you. That's reactivity. But Meteor can't monitor everything. It can't magically just understand everything about your program. You have to kind of give it a helping hand to say, hey, Meteor, here's an object. I'm going to declare it as being reactive, and that's telling you monitor the state of this object and the field within it, and update the page if that seems relevant to you. Okay, so what's happening here is that's what this reactive variable declaration is doing. We're telling Meteor, hey, monitor this object that we're creating, and we're going to bind it to initial value of 0. And then if you happen to refer to that object anywhere in the page and that object's value changes, you should update that part of the page automatically. Now it turns out that in our helper function, which is accessed in the page, we are referring to that reactive variable. We're actually invoking the get method. So that's how Meteor goes, hey, wait a second. Inside my HTML, okay, I've got a call to a helper function. That helper function is referring to a reactive variable that you've told me about. Therefore, I need to be monitoring it, and I'm going to update, I'm going to reinvoke that helper function and redisplay that piece of the page whenever that reactive variable's value change. Well, when does that reactive variable's value change? It changes right here because we're calling the set method of that reactive variable, which is referenced through this, and it turns out we're going to update that. Okay? So that's how Meteor reactivity works. Basically, in various and sundry ways, you're going to tell Meteor something is reactive, and then once it's reactive, once it's declared and Meteor knows that this thing is reactive, then Meteor can monitor things and update pages based upon changes to that. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about template instances, and when you start off, you might not kind of wonder, why the heck are we talking about template instances? Okay, and the reason why is because you can have multiple template instances on a page, like right here. Okay, so I've just updated this page to display 2 instances of the hello template instance. And if I save that out and then go back here, and now we can see, in fact, that we have this click me, you press the button 0 times up here, and then click me, you press the button 0 times down at the bottom of the page, with this info template in between. Furthermore, you notice I can click this button and I'm getting this value updated, and then I can click this button and it gets, this bottom value gets updated according to the number of times I've clicked this button, not the number of times I've clicked this button. Okay, so they're independent. That's all we mean by template instances, is we create a template, we create every time we use it or refer to it within a page by using this curly brace angle, less than, greater than sign. We're creating an instance, and then within our JavaScript, we use this to say which of the hello instances am I worried about right now. Okay, so this helper function, which is written once, no matter how many times we invoke the template in the page, it's going to find the right one. It's returning the counter associated with that specific template instance, and there can be many instances of the hello template. Okay, similarly with the button, we're using this instance field to know whether or not were we clicking the button that was associated with that template up there, or were we clicking the button associated with that template down there. Okay, so that's the notion of a template instance. Let's get rid of that, go back to the way we were. Okay, and then the final thing I wanted to discuss is this whole idea of reactive VAR and what would happen were we to not use a reactive VAR, because I think that can help kind of drive home the point. So let's just update this code to not refer to a reactive VAR, and we can do that like this: instance.counter equals instance.counter plus 1. And what you can see that I've done is, instead of having a reactive VAR, now I just have a regular old VAR. Regular old JavaScript VAR called counter. It's initialized to 0, and we return the value of that regular old counter inside here. And then when we click the button, we're going to increment it. And just to make things even hopefully clearer, let's write to the console the value of this counter every time I increment it. So I'm going to save that out. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to bring up the console, and I'm going to click this button. Okay? And now two interesting things happen. The first thing is you can see that 1 is printed out, okay, indicating that I have updated the value of that counter variable, but also this didn't change. And in fact, no matter how many times I click this, you can see I keep invoking that console.log, proving that in fact I am running that event and I am updating the value of my counter, but doggone it, nothing's happening in my page. Okay, the reason nothing's happening in my page is because it's not a reactive variable, so Meteor doesn't know it's supposed to do anything to the page when that value changes. Okay, so that's the whole notion of a session variable or a reactive variable. It's a way of telling Meteor, hey dude, watch the value of this object because the way a page should be displayed might need to change depending upon what the value of that is. Okay? All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this little overview of the example app and that it's cleared up a few questions you might have. I suggest you make this app, play around with it just like I've done so that you understand these concepts because they're super fundamental to Meteor, and as things get more complicated, you really have to have a solid understanding of them.